And YouTube, welcome back to a new video with Rams fan YT. In today's video, I will be going through my predictions for this week. Got some exciting games to go through with some FA Cup second round games, which will be very interesting. We've got some midweek of the Premier League games. We've got some EFL Trophy games. So a lot to go through. So to speak, I'm going to do a couple of live watch-alongs this weekend as well, and try and get to Gateshead versus Walsall, and some shorts that hopefully come out of that game as well. So a lot to look forward to on the channel coming up. But we're going to go into the predictions with Bournemouth versus Everton on tonight. Bournemouth at home. Bournemouth doing really well this season. It must be said. I mean, not as well as they did last season. They're on a bit of a poor in form now. I haven't won in the last 4 games. Therefore, looking a bit more mid-table, as you would probably more expect of a team like Bournemouth. But they started really well. Everton, only 1 loss in the last 4. But yeah, there's 1 point separating these two teams. 1 goal and goal difference. Home advantage, I think, will ring home, and Bournemouth will end their barren spell winning by 1-0. And because of how close the table is at the moment, that will shoot them up to about 7th place if results go their way. Fulham versus Manchester City. I fully expect to see Manchester City doing quite well this season. Probably around about that 2nd place at the moment. They are looking likely at. They're not as consistent as Arsenal are at present, but they are still a very good team. And you'd fully expect them, even though Fulham have won 3 out of the last 4 games, for them to beat Fulham. They are heavy favourites coming to this, and I'm going to go 2-0 to Manchester City. Newcastle United versus Tottenham Hotspur. Newcastle tend to like playing Spurs, especially at home, and seeing Spurs haven't won in the last 4, and also that I've got a job interview in Newcastle United tomorrow. I'm going to be predicting Newcastle to win 2-0 to Newcastle United. But yeah, I think this could be a very close game, but Newcastle do always seem to edge out over Spurs. On the Championship front, we've got Blackburn Rovers versus Ipswich Town, just for 1 Championship game. Blackburn did have a good spell, didn't they? I think it's slowed down, though, a bit now. And Ipswich, although they lost their last game, were in a really good run of form before that. And I fully suspect that they will reach the playoffs at least this season. I can't rule it out there. They have a squad which competed in the Premier League last season. So yeah, 1-0 to the Tractor Boys. On to some League One games, I believe. Wigan versus Burton is the only League One game tonight, because everyone else is still in the EFL Trophy. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Burton, they look decent. They did lose their last game, but before that, they were unbeaten in 4. And I know Wigan are unbeaten in 5, but I do have a slight inkling that Burton may be able to get something in this one. 2-1 to the Brewers, which will push them into a healthy mid-table position. It's quite an odd one to think about, Burton, because there's half of me which is thinking they will be in a relegation battle, because they normally are, but half of me thinking they're on such a decent run of form that they could feasibly get mid-table. So on to the EFL Trophy ones. Bradford City are travelling to Bolton Wanderers. Both of these two teams in League One, of course, both doing very well in League One as well. Bolton, especially recently, unbeaten in 5 with 3 wins in that spell. There's a lot of draws that these two teams have. They've both had 7 draws this season, and I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw. But I am going to back Bolton to win this game on penalties, because it goes straight to penalties, if you remember, after normal time in this competition. Now, Bristol Rovers versus Cambridge United, an all League 2 affair in this one. And Bristol Rovers haven't got much to play for at the moment. Well, they do. They're embroiled in relegation. I think the fact that they've lost so many, they need to get a win just to get some momentum. And this is sort of what the EFL Trophy does. You know, it's a bit of a joke of a competition, sometimes called the Mickey Mouse Trophy occasionally. But it does, if you're on a bad run of form, you want to be playing an EFL Trophy game so that you can actually put some things to right. And even a draw, if it's a good draw, can give a bit of confidence in it. Now we know Cambridge are decent; they're in the playoffs now of League Two, but I think they're not as fussed as a result. And I think Bristol Rovers could win this one 1-0. They just need something to go their favour to do better in the League Two campaign. Cardiff City are hosting AFC Wimbledon. Cardiff have done well in League One, and they'll probably be eyeing up a double, I should imagine. There was a time when we were talking about Wimbledon doing a decent enough job, but no wins now in the last 4 have seen them sunk down to 9th, which maybe might spur them on for this, but I do suspect Cardiff will win this one. 1-0 to Cardiff City, and you would probably say they're overriding favourites to win this competition. Doncaster Rovers versus Chesterfield. They're playing each other twice this week, which is a bit strange, seeming that they aren't in the same league. Doncaster in the League One, but not doing incredibly. They're just above that relegation zone in 18th. Chesterfield, however, are in. Well, they did lose the last one before, had a lot of draws in it, but they are still only 1 point off the playoffs. And I do suspect they'll be competitive for them even if they don't reach them this season. So yeah, I suspect Chesterfield might dominate this one. 3-0 to Chesterfield. I don't think Doncaster Rovers are going to be too bothered about being dumped out of this competition. Although clearly Chesterfield weren't, because they also lost 7-1 earlier on in this tournament, if you remember, against Crewe Alexandra. Harrogate Town versus Blackpool. This might be a chance for Harrogate to show themselves. It would be a huge upset if they managed to win this one. Blackpool, former Premier League club, former First Division champions, I believe, at one point as well. Certainly a huge team historically, Blackpool. So yeah, I think Harrogate, they're going to tie this up 2-2, and it's also Yorkshire versus Lancashire, but I do think Blackpool win this one on penalties. Leyton Orient versus Plymouth Argyle. Maybe Plymouth need something for this to lift them in a bit of form, because they're not great at the moment. But I do have to say I'm going to back Leyton Orient. They've not really got anything to play for at the moment. It seems to be quite a mid-table campaign for them so far. So yeah, I'm going to go 3-2 to Leyton Orient. I think it'll be an entertaining game for probably quite a small crowd. Lincoln City versus Huddersfield Town. Lincoln just need to get a bit of form, and if they do, they are going to be doing great this season. The reason I'm hesitant to even back them to get into the playoffs at the moment is, I know they're in 4th, but they're just so inconsistent at times. So, getting a win in the trophy, then following it up on the weekend. I think they're still in the FA Cup. I'll need to check, and we'll get that later anyway if they are. It's the same a bit with Huddersfield. Both of these two teams need a bit of momentum. At Sinsel Bank, I think it'll be a tight one. The Imps to win 1-0. Luton Town versus Exeter City. Luton only lost once in the last 6 games. Exeter struggling, understandably, in a sense that they've not been able to play at home for the last couple of things because of a fire at their stadium. They're just above relegation zone now. I think it was always going to be a difficult season for them, and I think it's just gotten a bit harder. I don't necessarily think they'll be relegated at the moment. I think there are worse teams out there. Yeah, in terms of EFL Trophy, I think the Hatters are going to get into the hat for the next round and win this one by 1-0. Northampton Town versus Wycombe Wanderers. Not too far of a distance between these two teams. Wycombe on a really good run of form as well. They've certainly picked up, and it certainly makes things look a bit better for perspective of the Buckinghamshire-based team. And I think they therefore take it into this competition and win 2-1. I think actually at the moment, you could feasibly say that Wycombe will get the playoffs. They're only 4 points away, and they're on a really good run of form. So, because we're not talking about the league, at all this episode in that is like League One and League Two. I think it is just worth bringing these in. Port Vale versus Barnsley. Yeah, I'm highly suspecting Barnsley with this. They've only lost once in the last 6 games. Port Vale haven't won in a long time, only 3 wins this season, which may mean that they galvanise to go and do something here, but I do suspect Barnsley win 3-1. Port Vale need to focus on the league, and I think that will be the mindset of a lot of Port Vale fans. Salford City versus Rotherham United. A bit of an interesting one, these two teams. Both of them you'd expect to be challenging for promotion and maybe aren't quite in that position. Well, Rotherham certainly not. Rotherham in 13th in the league. Salford have snuck into playoffs in 7th, so certainly not out of question. But yeah, I think this one is going to be a very even game. 0-0 draw, and I suspect Rotherham will win it on penalties just because of how good they've been at the moment in form terms. Stevenage versus Walsall. Walsall, not really the surprise to actually see them top of the league, but certainly seeing Stevenage in 2nd in League One is quite of a shock. And I think, you know what, that shock factor can continue. I think they're going to do well here. I think they're just concentrated on getting results at the moment. 3-1 to Stevenage. Would be mad to see them in the Championship, wouldn't it? Tranmere Rovers versus Fleetwood Town. The North-West teams on the West Coast, actually, both of them will be, well, it depends if you count Tranmere as on the Merseyside bit, or if some of the fans will be on the coast, I'm sure, but we're all. But yeah, I'm going to go a 0-0 draw in this one, but I do have to back Fleetwood to win on the penalty shootout because slightly better. Actually, no. I just think I can't entirely rationalise that, but I do think it's just going to be an even game. To be honest, they're both quite similar at the moment. Swindon Town versus Peterborough United. Swindon will certainly be. They're very confident at the moment, but maybe wanting to focus on the league, considering they're in 2nd and on a really good run of form. So they'd either want to keep that form going or stick with focusing on the league. As a result, a team like Peterborough, who, they're in the relegation zone still of the League One, and they'll just be wanting to get something. And yes, they have seemed to turn a bit of a corner. But yeah, I'm going to 3-0 to Peterborough United. I think Peterborough do stay up this season. Just can't get my head around Peterborough being relegated at current times. On to some National League North. There's a National League North game tonight. Radcliffe versus Chester. Both of these two teams, well, Radcliffe are actually the better of the two teams at the moment, which in terms of on the table front, which is a bit of a surprise, but they haven't won in the last 4 now, which has mean they've dropped down to 7th. Still in the playoffs, but I don't think it's feasibly going to happen this season. Chester unbeaten in 5. I think they'll be full of confidence coming into this one. Only 6 points separating the two of them. So I think it's not off the cards Chester get the playoffs, but they really need this run to carry on going. At the moment, I'm still yet to be convinced. But 3-0 to Chester, I'm going in this one. Hampton Richmond Borough versus AFC Toten. Yeah, I mean, Hampton Richmond Borough are now slumped into a relegation zone. They need something to change. They're doing really poorly at the moment. But so are Toten, actually. They're on a bit of a run of bad form as well. No win in the last 5. I think this is going to be a boring 0-0 draw. Hemel Hempstead Town versus Hornchurch. Hemel Hempstead only lost once in the last 6. We do like to talk a bit more about positivity on this channel, and I think Hemel Hempstead have that in abundance at the moment. Hornchurch in 3rd, still doing a decent enough job. They win this game tonight and they get into the automatic positions. So it's certainly not beyond the realm that they do it. But I think the Tudors on slightly better form, and I think I'm going to back them at home to win 3-1. Arsenal versus Brentford. We do know that Arsenal love a good draw, don't they? They've drawn. I don't think they'll lose it, but they don't always win games from previous seasons. And, Brentford only lost twice in the last 2 games. I think it's got a draw written all over it in this one. A 1-1 draw, which Arsenal will be a bit disappointed about, maybe. Brighton Hove Albion versus Aston Villa. Aston Villa only 1 defeat in the last 6 games, which is the same for Brighton, actually. This could be quite a competitive game. I think both of these 2 teams are very even on paper. But Aston Villa have that Champions League quality and that Unai Emery effect. So, yeah, 3-0 to Villa for me. Do either of these 2 teams get to the Champions League at the end of the season? I'm not necessarily convinced. There are a lot of good teams who are yet to truly hit their stride. You'd look at the likes of Liverpool, Spurs, Newcastle, even Crystal Palace or Man United. All could potentially make a late run for it. Burnley versus Palace. Talking about Palace, I do think they are a team that could definitely get Champions League this season. Defensively, only 11 goals conceded is Champions League defence. It's just their offensive output. If they can start scoring more goals, they'll really hit their stride. And they're up against the Burnley side, which, let's be honest, are probably going to be relegated this season. I'm a bit split at the moment between them, West Ham and Leeds. Out of them 3, which ones are going to inhabit the bottom 2? But yeah, Burnley have lost the last 4 in a row. Maybe things need to change. If they lose this one, you do have to begin questioning the manager of Scott Parker, because I just don't think Scott Parker can really keep a team up at this level. I'm not convinced at all. So I think they do need to just bring in a proven manager who can do that. So yeah, 2-0 to Crystal Palace in this one, and for Burnley to need to change their manager. Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Nottingham Forest. I don't like doing this, but Wolves are horrendous. They're not won all season. It's obviously going to be a Forest win. 3-0 to Forest. It annoys me saying it, but they're up against Wolves, who are absolutely awful at the moment. So yeah, Leeds United versus Chelsea. 4 defeats as well for Leeds in a bounce. I suspect Daniel Farke is under a bit of pressure, because he was under pressure at the start of the season, but after he got the team promoted. So it wouldn't be a surprise if Leeds suddenly decide to make a change and go in a different direction. If they lose this one, because if they win this one, it does cause a huge upset. And you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go with a Leeds win in this one. Why ever not? 3-0 to Leeds United. Totally wacky prediction, but we love to see them. Liverpool versus Sunderland. Actually, that's not exactly what I'm saying. They're both on 21 points, but they're not on the same run of form, because Liverpool on a bad run of form. But I would argue that Liverpool are a better squad overall, although they don't seem like it this season. We know they won the title, and I think Slot is feeling a bit of pressure maybe at the moment at Anfield. 2-0 to Liverpool. Because let's face it, if Sunderland do get Champions League, that will be one of the biggest shocks. It will almost be on par with not quite, but it will always be on par with a Leicester winning the league, wouldn't it? Sunderland managed to get themselves to the Champions League as soon as they get promoted. It will be truly historic. Crewe Alexandra versus Stockport County. This is a FA Cup game, is it? Let me check the... No, it's... Is this a league game? It might be a league game. Oh, no, it might be... No, it'll be an EFL Trophy game. What am I doing? They're not in the same league, but it's, for some reason there's an EFL Trophy game, just this one on the Thursday. Not for the Wednesday, rather. And to be fair, Stockport, they're in the league above. They're going to show a bit of that quality, I think. 2-0 to Stockport County. I wouldn't mind saying that I think they could potentially go on and win it this year. I think they've done decent amount in terms of they are in the playoffs as well of League One. they're showing a bit of something about them, and I wouldn't be too shocked if they turn up and win the competition. Manchester United versus West Ham United. This one is Thursday, isn't it? So, I think we're going to get a bit of a shock because it's Man United, so of course they're going to lose to West Ham. What else would you really be expecting? I'm going to go with they've only had one defeat in the last 4 games actually, West Ham. So yeah, 2-0 to West Ham. Bit of a shock in that one. A local derby day on Friday. Hull City versus Middlesbrough. I say local derby, they're not that local, but both of them don't really have much of other rivals in terms of things other than ones which they try to force. I think you look at Middlesbrough, they're just a bit better at the moment. Derby played them, and we tried to outperform one of the better teams in the Championship this season. I'm still not convinced that they're going to get automatic promotion. I'm really not, but I think Middlesbrough do win this one. Only 1-0. They're up against a decent Hull side after all. Yeah. Okay, on to the FA Cup games. We know that you've really been wanting me to go through. Actually, no, it's only one FA Cup game for now. We're going through the rest of the Saturday up at EFL ones. But one on Friday night, Salford City versus Lincoln City. Could be a very interesting one. I'm going to go with a upset in this one. I think Lincoln maybe be preoccupied by other things in their mind. Both of them are really good teams, both in the playoffs in their respective divisions, league apart. One will draw, and I think Salford City will either win in extra time or on penalties. I think that could be an upset. The Salford will want to be drawing someone like Manchester United in this cup, so why wouldn't they go for it? Aston Villa versus Arsenal. I think Arsenal get back to winning ways in this one. I'm going to go a 2-0 win for the Gunners, even though Aston Villa are decent. Nuno Emery visiting his former club, isn't it? 2-0 to Arsenal. AFC Bournemouth versus Chelsea. I'm going to go a narrow 1-0 win to Chelsea here. They are certainly wanting to get Champions League. I think maybe deservedly getting Champions League for next season. Everton versus Nottingham Forest. It's a bit of an easy game for Forest, maybe. But Sean Dyche heading back to Everton. Obviously, Sean Dyche, maybe arguably unfairly, got dismissed from Everton. So maybe also going back with a bit of vengeance. I'm sure he's not a vengeful man. I used to be really into Sean Dyche before he went to Nottingham Forest. What a shame. 2-0 to Nottingham Forest in this one. Manchester City versus Sunderland. A horrible week for Sunderland to play football, isn't it? They've got both Liverpool and Manchester City. If they come away with even anything from these 2 games, then they're certainly looking at strong candidates. But I'm going to have to back Man City to win this one 2-1. Newcastle United versus Burnley. Newcastle United at home. We're up against Burnley. I'm going to have to back a win for the Geordies. 2-0 to Newcastle United. I doubt they'll be down in 13th come the end of the season. I think they have definitely got the opportunity at the moment for going on a little bit of a run. Maybe drawing some wins together. Next season, 2026-27, will mark a centenary since they won the last time they won a first tier title. So it'll be interesting if they could replicate that next season, but that's for something else entirely. It's Tottenham Hotspur versus Brentford, the Thomas Frank derby. Thomas Frank jumping ship from Brentford to Spurs. Well, look how that ended up. Spurs in 12th, Brentford in 10th. Brentford certainly proving they don't need Thomas Frank and proving a lot of the doubters wrong. A lot of people said that Brentford were going to be relegated at the start of the season. I did not fall into that temptation. I think I said they were going to be around about mid-table, actually. But I do think Thomas Frank will prove himself in this one and win 3-1. You'd expect Spurs to be higher than where they are at the moment. Let's be honest. Definitely competing for around about a Europa League place anyway. Leeds United versus Liverpool. I think Liverpool need a good performance in this one, and I think they're going to deliver it. 6-1 to Liverpool. There's a bit of a rivalry. Well, Leeds got hated by everyone at various points, but yeah, Liverpool versus Leeds always has a bit of needle in it. Same with Leeds as Man United and Leeds versus Derby County. We all three of us have a bit of needle with each other. Well, with Leeds, all three of us teams don't like Leeds, so do something for us, Liverpool. Charlton Athletic versus Pompey. Yeah, Charlton are an interesting one. They were at one point looking really strong, but 4 defeats in a row, seeing them tumble down to 17th. It is ruthless, the championship. It really is, isn't it? They went from looking like they were going to get playoffs to now really not. And I'm beginning to question Nathan Jones' position at Charlton Athletic. If he doesn't get something from this game, if he loses this one, I will be starting calling for his head, I think, because you'd expect Charlton to get something against Portsmouth. You know, they're in relegation zone, Portsmouth. They're not doing very well this season. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw, though. Neither of them are on very good form at the moment. But yeah, certainly Charlton Athletic for me on the managerial sack list watch. Derby County versus Leicester City. I'm planning on doing a live watch along for this one on the, well, at the 12:30 kickoff on the Saturday. I'll be getting my Derby County kits out. I'll be, you know, full on roaring for the Rams to win. And we're actually above Leicester at the moment. We're in 11th. They're in 16th. I'd hope to win it, but we've lost Carlton Morris, which is not ideal. It suddenly puts us in a bit of a weaker position. As we've been saying all season, though, it's probably going to be mid-season for the Rams. I actually don't think there's too much difference between us and Leicester at the moment. There's only 2 points. I know a fairly even game. It also, the Leicester fans view it as a local rivalry. Us Derby fans, no, it's Nottingham Forest all the way. You know, we couldn't care less really about how Leicester perform. So yeah, I'm going to go 2-2 draw, which is a bit diplomatic, and I do want Derby to win. But I think it's probably more of a fair outcome. Watford versus Norwich City. These two teams used to yo-yo constantly together. They used to go up together and down together between the Championship and the Premier League. Not so much anymore. And actually, a bit disappointing, both of these two teams this season, you'd argue. Watford in 15th. They've actually gathered a bit together some form of late, but they had a really poor time at one point. Norwich City beginning maybe to turn a leaf into something a bit more refreshing with a changing manager, but they're still in 23rd, still looking pretty poor this season, let's be honest. But no, I'm going to back Norwich to win this one. I think they're beginning to do things, and I don't suspect they'd necessarily be in the relegation. Well, at the moment, I have to say that they would, but I didn't initially think that they would. 2-1 to Norwich City. Let me know what you think about that one. Blackburn Rovers versus Sheffield Wednesday. Yet again, another devastating blow for Sheffield Wednesday. Another 6 points deduction, is it? It was certainly a large one. They're currently on minus 10 points. I know they got more points deduction this week. And it's just such a frustrating position to be in as a Wednesday fan. I can only but assume. Well, as a Derby fan, we sort of went through a similar thing, and I was looking actually at where Derby were in that equivalent season in 2021-22, and we were actually much better than Sheffield Wednesday. Not to gloat or brag anything, but Sheffield Wednesday also on the pitch aren't really performing. Yes, there's justifying reasons, but Derby were actually doing all right at the same sort of stage at that point. But they are up against Blackburn, against the Lancashire team, so there is a bit of needle in it. There always is. Blackburn only won once now in the last 4. I think this could be a bit of an even game. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw in this one. It won't be a win for Sheffield Wednesday, but maybe something for the Wednesday fans to celebrate. Bristol City versus Mill. Almost had an absolute calamitous disaster in that one. 3rd versus 6th. If the season ended today, they would be playing each other in the playoffs semi-final. It's at Ashton Gate, which I think does benefit Bristol City. They're on a very similar run of form, very similar in terms of sides, in terms of points gained this season. I think Bristol City have just looked a bit better in some of the finer margins, just not managed to maybe see out the points as much. I think it could be a close game. I do rate Bristol City's squad very highly, though. 4-3 to Bristol City, or the former Derby County Academy, as it would seem. Yeah, I think Millwall actually just... They're conceding too many, I think, to even be in the playoffs at the moment. And that's where my concern lies. Ipswich Town versus Coventry City. I think they're a bit of a shock. I don't think Coventry win every game, and I know they've won 5 in a row. Another great 10 out of 10 performance from Frank Lampard. I think Ipswich take the spoils in this one. 2-1 to Ipswich Town, which may be a bit disappointing for Coventry, but they've been looking so dominant at the moment. They're 10 points clear up for the title spot, already on 43 points in 18 games at this point in the season. You'd surely be a fool to say that Coventry would get anything but automatic promotion and the title at the moment. 50 goals, by the way, in 18 games. Absolute goal machines there. Your likes of Thomas Asante. Trying to remember who it's actually Wright still at the club. I can't remember if he is or not, but they certainly have got some decent. Let me check who that other centre forward is. Who? Efron Mason Clark, that will be it. He's the one who tends to be, along with Thomas Asante, knocking in the goals. But we do have Haji Wright still as well, so they've got a very decent firepower as well. Matt Grimes, I hugely rate. I would love to have a player like Matt Grimes in our team. I think it's kind of what we needed in the summer, but obviously we couldn't get Matt Grimes because he was at Coventry. Preston North End versus Wrexham. There is never a world, right, that Preston get actual playoffs at the end of the season. Surely not. They are such a mid-table championship team. They are performing undeniably out of their expectations. I think I put them as maybe relegation candidates at the start of the season, but they certainly were for a lot of people as well, and just proving the unpredictable nature of a championship. But you look at Wrexham, they're unbeaten in quite a long time now, and beginning to look like a team which could maybe sneak into a playoff conversation, which a lot of people were saying that would happen with Wrexham at the start of the season. I wasn't as convinced. So I'm going to go 3-2 to Wrexham in this one. They are going win-draw at the moment, so I think they could win this one if that form continues as well. Queen's Park Rangers versus West Bromwich Albion, 12th versus 13th. Not a lot to separate these two teams, both on the same amount of points this season. Only really West Brom being a bit more defensively sound. I'm going to go West Brom to win this one 3-1 as a result. Because I think if they start getting their act together, they have a capability, certainly, of being a playoff pushing team. They just haven't proven it enough for me at the moment. Sheffield United versus Stoke City. Only one win in 4 now for Stoke. It is beginning to look a bit creaky. Their hold on being a strong team. There was at one point that they were looking at destined for automatic promotion. And I think they definitely have the capability to get back to that point. But, Sheffield United unbeaten in 4, 3 wins on the bounce. They're back. I think Sheffield United are back and they are now going to start ascending through the league. 2-0 to Sheffield United. They're at home at Bramall Lane. Chris Wilder has certainly turned this side around, who is surprised, to be honest. Chris Wilder loves Sheffield United and Sheffield United love him. Should have never got rid of him in the first place. That is on their incredible levels of stupidity of the ownership. Southampton versus Birmingham City, 14th versus 7th. Southampton, though, only one loss in 5, 4 wins in that spell. Now, yes, only one loss in 6 for Birmingham City. But I think if you look at Southampton, they've looked much more convincing in the last few weeks. I think ask any Saints fan and they would agree. Birmingham City, I still think will probably reach the playoffs this season. But At home at St Mary's, I'm going to have to back Southampton to win this one. 3-1 to the Saints. Swansea City versus Oxford United. And Swansea, I'm sorry to say it, but you're going to have to change manager. It is, for me, a very poor season for Swansea City. They should not be down in the relegation. Oh, they have brought in Vitor Mateos, so he's not really done much better either. Let's be honest, but he's only been brought in, he's only had a couple of games. Let's be fair to him. Let's give him a bit more time, shall we? But yeah, he's a tactician, and if he needs to get a result in this one of some sort, Oxford United are just above him in 20th. I think it will be a very end-to-end, very even game. Both of these two teams desperate to avoid the drop. A 3-3 draw is what my prediction would be for this. Let's do League One first before we get into the FA Cup game, shall we? Because let's face it, building up suspense a bit for the... We'll do it after the National League predictions. How about that? Cardiff City versus Huddersfield Town. Cardiff City, as I have already mentioned, top of the League One table. And for me, they're the team which I have got to back to win the league at this point in proceedings. I know Huddersfield is a decent team. Both these two teams actually in the Premier League not that long ago, weren't they? It certainly feels it may have been almost a decade at this point, but you certainly remember when they were in the heady heights of the Premier League. I'm going to think it's going to be a narrow game. I think Cardiff do edge out 1-0 to the Bluebirds at home as well. Plymouth Argyle versus Bradford City. I think Bradford are slowly looking a bit worse for wear. I think they still get playoffs, but I'm not as convinced as I was a few weeks ago. I don't know about anyone else, but I think them draws are beginning to take their toll on them. And I think Plymouth need a result, and everyone will be focused on the FA Cup, but this upset won't really be registered on anyone's radar. But 2-1 to Plymouth Argyle at Home Park. It's always an absolute fortress, or historically was, especially for teams like coming down from Yorkshire to Devon. It's a long way to go. And, Plymouth, you'd expect to be a team which managed to stay up, but, at the moment, they're just not looking likely. But yeah, 2-1 Plymouth. Colchester United versus Gillingham, the only League 2 game in this one. And, there's not much separating them. 1 point if you add it in total. 4 games of meeting for Gillingham, but 3 of them are draws. Well, 3 wins on a bounce for Colchester United make this a very interesting game. There's only 1 goal against difference splitting them and 2 goals for. It has all the hallmarks of a draw, but I think Colchester on that good run of form of winning at the moment, and that just breeds a load of confidence at home. I will not be surprised if they get to the playoffs this season. I've been saying it for a while. Colchester are a bit of a sleeping dark horse in a sense, but there is going to be a time that they manage to get into the playoffs. 2-1 to Colchester United, which, yes, is an upset, but it's one of the ones which we're going to see. Morecambe versus Boston United. 2 former Football League teams and 2 teams involved in a relegation scrap. 4 points separating these 2 teams. Morecambe looked shot dead and buried at one point in the season. And I wouldn't even say that they're the worst team at the moment. I would say Gateshead are the worst team currently in the National League. And I would back Morecambe, maybe not to get out of it at the moment. There's still concerns linger over them, but there's only now 2 defeats in the last 6. It certainly is turning a corner, and Boston haven't won in the last 5. I think Morecambe win this one. They're also at home. 2-1 to Morecambe as they push themselves, which if Brackley aren't playing in the National League, and if Gateshead aren't playing in the National League, so that will mean that Morecambe will manage to crawl themselves out of a relegation zone, which will be great news for what was quite a trouble-ridden team at the start of the season. Aldershot Town versus Altrincham. Now, I know Alty have only had one win in the last six, and one loss in the last six, 4 wins in that spell, and Aldershot are looking horrendous. You might even need to argue for another change in manager, because clearly John Coleman wasn't the right one for them, so to speak. How long has he been in now? Probably quite a while. And I'm beginning to have concerns over whether he was the right person to come in and steer this team, because he's bringing in since the 24th of October. He's had over a month now to sort this team out, and he's just not. Aldershot are looking even worse than ever, arguably. But I think, having said all of that, at home, I'm going to cheeky 2-1 Aldershot. It seems unlikely, considering they are the worst form team in the entirety of the National League. But, wilder things have happened in football. Forest Green Rovers versus Solihull Moors. Solihull have only had one loss in the last 5 games. I know Forest Green Rovers have been absolutely almost faultless of late, but I think it is worth saying how well Solihull have changed since they changed their manager, proving a really inspired change. But yeah, I think Forest Green Rovers 1 point off the top. May view this as a bit of an opportunity to reclaim it, and I'm going to have to back them to win this one. 1-0 to Forest Green Rovers, carrying their amazing form at the moment, which is not even the best form in the league. York City are actually better on a form at the moment. SE Halifax Town versus Braintree Town. Halifax only 1 win in the last 6 now. Really looking like they deserve to be at 11th place, actually, I'm going to be honest, because I don't think they're too bad enough to be sucked into any of these mid-table teams, but they're just not good enough to be a playoff competitor at the moment, and that's where we are with them. And Brackley Town, the issue we're going to say is how much loyalty is there which weighs in the current era of football. Sorry, we won't scrap that. It's Braintree Town, so not Brackley Town. I was looking at the wrong one, so they both begin with. Braintree are 3 games unbeaten now. Sorry, so scratch that. But I think, still, even so, Braintree are down at the wrong end of the table, 1 point off relegation zone. Halifax, for me, do win this one 1-0. I don't think it'll be convincing by any lengths. Hartlepool United versus Yeovil Town. 2 points now off the playoffs, Hartlepool. They are sneakily looking quite decent. I'm 50-50 on backing them, actually, to get into it now, because I think Scunthorpe could fall out of it, because they're looking a bit shaky at the moment. There's definitely a possibility in that. Yeovil, very mid-table, and I think things are going to get a bit worse before they get better, which is surely not what the Yeovil fans want to hear. But going to have to back Hartlepool to win this. It's a long way for Yeovil to travel as well. 2-1 to Hartlepool United, and if games go their way, I don't know if Southend are playing or not, but if Southend aren't playing in the... They are up against Rochdale. So, certainly games could go their way, because Rochdale are doing well this season. But if games do go their way, Hartlepool could be in the playoffs at the end of this weekend. Rochdale versus Southend United. Clash of the 2 teams that were played each other in the playoffs. An incredible tie last season, you may remember. And you know what? I think Rochdale, are in this position that is slightly precarious. I think they could get the title, but there's an occasional performance for me that is just not convincing me enough that they'll get the title. I think they'll probably finish as runners-up, but I'm still going to back, I've been saying now for a few weeks, I'm still going to back York City for the title. I think Southend though, definitely get playoffs this season. I don't think they drop out. And I actually think they do win this one 4-3 to Southend United. So we can almost scrap entirely what we were saying about Hartlepool earlier if we were to follow my predictions. But after all, they're only my predictions. I'm only human. I don't have no telepathic future reading ability of any sort. Scunthorpe versus Tamworth. Now, I know Tamworth on a really bad run of form, only one win now in the last 6. But I think, I'm not sure. They could suddenly look quite a lot better, or they could look worse. It's hard to see. We're at a bit of this junction at the moment, and I'm going to back Tamworth to win this one, which is a bit nuts. But yeah, Scunthorpe haven't won in the last 3. Maybe a good time for Tamworth to be playing Scunthorpe. 1-0 to Tamworth, a very narrow win, which I think is a bit of a crazy suggestion, but it could happen. It could. Right, on to the FA Cup. The real reason you've been watching me witter on probably for so long. We all love the FA Cup here. We think it's I think it's the greatest competition in the world, actually. I think it's so great it's the oldest knockout competition in the world, and for me, a position of seeing a non-league team have the possibility of knocking out a Premier League team is absolutely amazing. Did you know that Tottenham Hotspur were the only team in non-league to win an FA Cup back in 1901? Well, if you didn't, you do now. But yes, Accrington Stanley versus Mansfield Town. Yeah, I'm not going to start off with an upset, as much as many of you will probably want me to. Accrington, yes, they've started gathering a bit of form in the league. But, Mansfield, they've not really got much to play for this season. They're very mid-table. And you know what? We'll back them to have a cheeky cup run. I know Nigel Clough did it in the EFL Cup a few times when it was with Burton. Hasn't really necessarily built a name for himself in the FA Cup yet. But why not? 3-0 to Mansfield Town. If they draw someone like Nottingham Forest, that could be a hugely interesting game, couldn't it? Chelmsford City versus Weston-super-Mare. At least one Tier 16 will be in the hat for the third round draw, because both of these two teams in the National League South. And considering how well Weston-super-Mare have done so far in the league, I won't be surprised if they carry on that. But I think it will be a difficult game. Neither of these two teams want to lose this at all. 1-0 to Weston-super-Mare is what I'm going to go with, which will be truly incredible for the club. If Weston-super-Mare draw someone like Bristol City in the next round, that's a huge game, And there's so many possibilities for these non-league teams. Cheltenham Town versus Buxton. I was listening to an interview on BBC Radio Derby from the Buxton owner, and saying he would have actually rather had a bit of a more of an interesting tie. Cheltenham, for him, it doesn't necessarily infuse him as such, because nobody talks really about an upset of knocking out a Cheltenham Town in the FA Cup. And it's at Whaddon Road, which is a horrible pitch. It's actually a worse pitch than Buxton, because Buxton's got a beautiful 3G pitch. And it's one of them ones that if they knock them out, nobody talks about it. But if they get knocked out, again, nobody talks about it, and they don't get that financial reward. And Buxton haven't been in the third round for a very long time. So it'd be truly historic if they managed to get past this round. But I think a 0-0 draw, but I do think Cheltenham Town win in either extra time or on penalties. I do think maybe that depth will come through. Another frustrating season for the Bucks in the FA Cup, because they've got to such a point that you think you're going to draw a big team. Like, imagine if they draw a Bolton or a Wigan or a Stockport County, which were nearby, and I think that would have had a bit more of a pull to that game, maybe, especially if it was Wigan, former winners within recent history. Would have been really interesting. Exeter City versus Wycombe Wanderers. I don't think too many people are concerned in this. Both are League One teams. Both are in the sort of bottom half of the table. Well, I think Wycombe's very mid-table, actually, but Exeter's certainly struggling. Go 2-2 draw. I don't know if this will actually play at St James's Park. I think Exeter City will win this one in extra time or on penalties. That home support will surely, if they can get back to their home ground for this one, that'd be great. Fleetwood Town versus Luton Town. Luton, pretty certain Luton have won the FA Cup before. I may be absolutely yapping in this one, but didn't Luton win the FA Cup historically? They were runners-up, in 1958-59. They won the League Cup in 1987-88. But yeah, they certainly have. They were runners-up in the FA Cup, so it's still a decent scalp if Fleetwood managed to pull this off. But I think Luton win this one every day of the week. 2-1 to Luton Town. You know, they're not having the greatest of League One seasons. They're in 7th. They would have probably expected an automatic return, and I just can't see them getting the playoffs at the moment. So a good cup run will maybe make it a bit more memorable. Grimsby Town versus Wealdstone. Can Grimsby do the levels of upsets that they had and go on the run that they sort of had with the EFL Cup early in the season? If you remember, they knocked out Manchester United. I'm going to go with a no, actually. I think Wealdstone could actually knock them out. A cheeky upset for the non-league team from London. 1-0 to Wealdstone, which, that suddenly puts them in the position of drawing all sorts of teams. Like maybe Wealdstone versus Spurs would be a very, very interesting game, wouldn't it? Or Wealdstone versus Arsenal, or one of them ones. What stage? They come into the third round, don't they? At that point. So yeah, it's hugely interesting, that one. Milton Keynes Dons versus Oldham Athletic. 2 League 2 teams. Very defensively sound team, Oldham. We've spoken about this quite a lot of lengths on this channel already. And you know what? I'm going to go with 0-0 draw because I just think Oldham's strengths is their defence. So they may be able to frustrate Paul Warne a bit. But, at the end of the day, Warne's men are going to get it done in either extra time or on penalties. Peterborough United versus Barnsley. 2 League One clubs. Barnsley are in a position where they're just mid-table. It doesn't matter too much to them. Probably an FA Cup run will do them better than Peterborough, who are in a relegation scrap and wants to desperately get out. So, yeah, I'll go with a 1-0 to Barnsley. I don't think at the end of the day there's too much in this one. Port Vale versus Bristol Rovers. I think Port Vale, as I was addressing earlier in the EFL Trophy question, need to get a win under their belts to suddenly, and the same with Bristol Rovers actually. I said with both, they need to get wins under their belts to get that bit of form. And I think Port Vale win this one 2-0 to Port Vale. Port Vale were caught in that catch-22 position of being too good at the moment for League 2 by the looks of it, but just not good enough for League 1. Stockport County versus Cambridge United. I think Stockport County could also go on a cheeky FA Cup run. I really do. Maybe even to put an upset out in the next round. But yeah, I think in this one, 2-0 up against Cambridge United. Swindon Town versus Bolton Wanderers. I know Swindon are doing really well in League 2, but Bolton are doing all right in League 1, and I think it's been a while since Bolton have had a good FA Cup run. So 1-0 to Bolton Wanderers. See if they can put their name back on that, that map in a sense. But I was going to say get their name back on the trophy, so to speak. But I then doubted myself if they'd ever won. They have won the FA Cup. They won it 4 times. Last time was 1957-58. And also the fact they're just not going to win it. Let's be honest. We'll be kidding ourselves if we thought that Bolton could win the FA Cup this season. But it'll be good to have a run in it nevertheless. Wigan Athletic are against Barrow. These 2 teams, I'm sorry to say it, but they're in a bit of a position that nobody is particularly a hugely infused fan of either of these 2 teams in the local area. Wigan have been losing support a lot recently, and Barrow's Barrow. So yeah, Wigan Athletic, though, did win almost a decade ago, just over a decade ago now, the FA Cup, beating Manchester City, a truly historic occasion. And they'll be looking to replicate some of them good times in this competition with a 4-1 win up against Barrow in this one. Sutton United versus Shrewsbury Town. We're also planning on doing a live watch along for this one at 5:15, because I think this one could be an interesting one in the FA Cup. Because Sutton are a team that do tend to cause upsets. They had that very historic upset against Coventry City back in the 70s, I want to say 1977. Was it when Sutton played up against Coventry? 1989, sorry, when they managed to beat Coventry 2-1 at home. But I don't think people necessarily view this in the same light as an upset. And I think it could be a 0-0 draw. And I think Shrewsbury Town do win in extra time or on penalties. But both these two teams have had upsets in recent years, haven't they? I don't know if it was necessarily in this competition. But am I making this up? Or Shrewsbury Town played against Liverpool in... yeah, they did. So they, in 2019-20, it was in the FA Cup. It was in the fourth round of the FA Cup, and they played against Liverpool, and they drew 2-2 and lost the replay only 1-0. So yeah, I thought I wasn't making them out because they also almost were giant killers. So there is certainly history of these two teams being decent in this competition. Actually, twice Shrewsbury Town have reached the quarter-finals of the FA Cup in 1978-79 and 1981-82. But yeah, 0-0 draw with Shrewsbury Town winning extra time or penalties. Chesterfield versus Doncaster Rovers. I've got to back at least one Derbyshire team in the FA Cup to do well in this round. So I'm going to back Chesterfield to cause an upset. Win 5-2. Paul Cook absolutely loves this competition. I'm pretty certain he does anyway. Didn't he... Am I making this up, or didn't he? He did something like, wasn't he? I'm trying to think about. Or was it? Surely he did something in the FA Cup. Yes, it was when he took Wigan on a good FA Cup run. Like he managed to get Wigan to beat West Ham United, Bournemouth, Manchester City, all in the Premier League in 2017. If you remember, back then it wasn't that long ago, but yeah, certainly 5-2 to Chesterfield. He does love a good cup run. AFC Telford United versus Southport. We'll put the other FA Cup ones on for a hold for a minute as we go on to the National League North and South. Both these two teams are in desperate battling positions now to avoid relegation, I would say. Telford in 16th. I think they've managed to probably clear themselves a bit of that danger zone. I think mid-table would probably suit Telford. But Southport, they've been on really good run of form, actually. They're the third most informed team over the last 6 games in the National League North, which has seen them now taken out of a relegation zone. And I don't think at the moment I can see them going back in, especially seeing you got teams like Worksop, which are on a bit of a bad run of form at the moment. I think Peterborough Sports are not fully drawn on either. And obviously the current bottom 4. See, I think this could be a very even game. We'll go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Curzon Ashton versus Alfreton Town. I want Alfreton to win this one. I really do. I'm just not seeing it. Curzon Ashton are 2 points away from the playoffs. I do think it'll be an even one, though. 7 draws for Curzon Ashton. If they don't win a lot is their issue. Alfreton drawn 6. So I think could be quite an even game, actually. We'll go with a 0-0 draw, which was almost definitely not going to happen based on some of the goals conceded charts. 30 conceded for Curzon Ashton, 37 for Alfreton. But, why not? We'll go with a 0-0 draw in this one. AFC Fylde versus Merthyr Town. First versus third. Merthyr Town won so many games in a row now. It is unbelievable how good that team is. I cannot remember the last time they lost. I generally can't, or even drew. But, Fylde is 4 points above them. And at the moment, I think Merthyr Town deserve to be in the top 3, but I'm still yet to be fully drawn upon their defensive capabilities to be able to push for that title. I think it'll be a very even game. We'll go with a 0-0 draw in this one. Hereford versus Peterborough Sports. Another relegation 6 points, if you will. 20th versus 22nd. Somehow Hereford have managed to slip into relegation zone. Out of the teams that are currently in relegation zone, Hereford are definitely one which I think could get out of there. They've got the experience of being in this level, and there was a few seasons in a row where they finished like 19th. So I think in this one up against Peterborough Sports, it'll be a 1-1 draw, which admittedly doesn't suit either party overly well. But it is what it is. Kings Lynn Town versus Chester. As I've just been talking about earlier on in this video, Chester on that really, really good run of form at the moment. And they're travelling it to Kings Lynn Town, who are on an equally good run of form. 14th versus 15th. Not a huge lot of difference. A point separate, and they've got exactly the same run of form. But if Chester win on the midweek one, that'll push them into this good, confident position. I think they're going to get another 3-0 win away at the Walks at Kings Lynn Town. Marine versus Spennymoor Town, 10th versus 8th. Both of these two teams, I don't think will reach the playoffs, but they're looking at the moment like they want to. Marine just outside on goal difference. Spennymoor 2 points off, with as well a healthy bit of goal difference, like differential preventing them from getting to that point. We know the issues with Marine. They just can't score enough. Only 21 goals this season, which, yes, is slowly increasing, but it's nowhere near at some of the pace that some of the other teams around them are at. I think this one will be a 2-2 draw in all. I can't split these two teams. Maybe you lot can. Oxford City versus Darlington. Darlington have been beaten in such a long time, but they're now 4th in the table. They have seemed to storm out of absolutely nowhere. And I would, at the present moment in time, say they are definitely going to get into the playoffs. I can't see a reason why they can't. They're just so good at the moment. And you know what? I think travelling to Oxford City may be a bit of a thorn, because maybe they're expecting to come over and a bit roll over Oxford City. I think Oxford City could well be a team that does get out that relegation zone. Another one of them ones which I think have a capability to. And they're, 4 games now without a win. I'm going to go a 2-2 draw in this one, which is a more mad result than what I've just said in the previous one, which keeps Darlington's unbeaten run continuing. But yeah, I think could be a cheeky little upset. Scarborough Athletic versus Bedford Town. Scarborough have faltered a bit down into 5th, and it's not quite squeaky bum time yet, but I don't know if they'll necessarily... I'm not as confident as they were of them being able to get into the playoffs. My confidence has waned a bit. They are up against a Bedford Town team, though, who have only won once in the last 6 games. You'd expect to win for Scarborough, but I'm going to go in 0-0 draw in this one. South Shields versus Kidderminster Harriers. I've been saying it for a while now. Kidderminster Harriers do not fill me confidence that they're going to manage to get to playoffs this season. However, I think South Shields haven't actually looked as great at the moment as maybe necessarily their stats are pointing to, with them on 43 points. But if you look at the last few games, they've been throwing away goals, have not been looking very convincing. And some of the teams that we've been playing against are a bit weaker, the likes of Oxford City. So yeah, I think Kidderminster Harriers could cause an upset here. I'm going to go with a 5-0 win, which would assuade probably all my concerns about them not being good enough to be in the playoffs. But, they have that capability to do it, Kidderminster. They're just not as much as I've liked to have seen maybe this season. Worksop Town versus Chorley. Chorley is somebody that I'm 50-50 on reaching the playoffs this season. They normally do, and that's why I've been backing them so much. But in 11th, it's a long old road to go. There's a lot of teams around them stacking up on a similar amount of points, and it makes it much more difficult. But if they can go on a run, They can definitely get into them playoffs positions. And they're up against the Works Up, which would be a good place to start a run. We've only had one win in the last 5 with 4 defeats in a row before their last game. I'm going to 4-1 win for Chorley in this one. Works Up, I wouldn't be surprised if they get relegated this season. I'm going to say it now. And I know they're not an extra team. That's why they may point me and saying that's the reason I'm saying it. But I actually think they're just not as... Their surprise package element has disappeared now, and people sort of know how to play against them. On to National League, so I've got Chesham United versus Dover. Dover unbeaten in 4, now in 11th place, looking decent. Chesham looking very mid-table, let's face it, in 14th place on 27 points. Only a point separating these two teams. We'll have to go with a 0-0 draw then, I suppose. Just out of how balanced these two teams are on the balance of play at the moment. Chippenham Town versus Horsham. Horsham in 5th on a really good unbeaten run at the moment. Not quite levels of being best in the league, but they're certainly up there in terms of being very decent team. Chippenham, well, they're the polar opposite. They're bottom of the league, 2 wins all season. But, you know, they've only lost once now in the last 4 games. Are we seeing a bit of a turning the corner of Chippenham? I don't know. I'm still not convinced they're going to be able to stay up this season. You know, we'll go with a cheeky 0-0 draw in this one. Because, actually, Horsham's unbeaten run, and the last 6 games, 4 of them have been draws. It wouldn't be mind-blowing for me if that does transpire in this game. Dorking Wanderers versus Eastbourne Borough. Eastbourne also in the relegation zone, 3 points above Chippenham, and I'm going to have to say it. They're probably the team which I was most surprised to see in the relegation zone. Out of all the bottom 4, Eastbourne, I'd certainly not expect it, and therefore I would say if there's any team in the relegation zone to get out, it would be Eastbourne. And you may call me nonsensical for doing so because they are 23rd, but I can't ever rule them out. But we're going to be talking about Dorking here. They're just above, well, they're just in the playoff zone, and surely a team that you'd expect to get at least playoffs this season. Although I'm still saying look out for Maidenhead United. Just keep your eye on them because I think they could come out of nowhere and shock a few people. But at the moment in time, Dorking Wanderers, I think, do win this game fairly. I don't know if it's necessarily comfortably, but 3-2 is what I've got written down for Dorking to win this game by. Ebbsfleet United versus Worthing. Now, I know Worthing have only lost once in the last 6 games, and all the other ones have been wins. And they've been looking so solid that I would almost say that they deserve to be in the title or win the title at the moment. 3 points off the title as well. Certainly wouldn't be anything to be surprised about if they did get into that title position. I'm going to go with a really rogue one, though. Sometimes teams have a massive shock defeat, and Ebbsfleet are a team which just outside the playoffs. I'm going to have a healthy boost for their goal difference as well. 7-2 to Ebbsfleet United, which is an absolutely wacky position. But this league does have some wacky scorelines at times. Got to think about that as well. Enfield Town versus Hampton and Richmond Borough. Relegation 6-pointer and a bit of a London derby. Enfield Town are beaten 3 now and just the relegation zone by a point in 19th. 2 points behind them is Hampton and Richmond Borough in relegation zone in 22nd, who have not won in a long, long time. Like, we're talking ages now. I can't remember when I was talking about a Hampton Richmond Borough win, quite frankly. And so I'm going to have to back Enfield to win this one. I'm sorry, but Hampton Richmond Borough just sinking down and down in my estimations. 1-0 to Enfield Town, which, you know, there's certainly a team which will probably still be in that relegation battle come the end of the season, but it's certainly not... I don't think they'll get relegated at this moment in time, just because of how bad some of the other teams are. Farnborough versus ASC Totton. Another one of them slightly bad teams. Just for relegation zone by goal difference of Farnborough, which they've only won once in the last 6 games. Haven't won in the last 4. Is beginning to be a bit concerning, but we know Totton are now beginning to have a bad run form because they seem to be found out a bit, which tends to happen with promoted teams. They've come in as a bit of an unknown package, gone a good run of form, and then slightly taper off as their new style of play gets worked out. So yeah, I'm going 0-0 draw in this one. A bit of a boring grey game. Maidenhead United versus Hornchurch. I know I was saying look out for Maidenhead, who have now won back-to-back games, but there's just something in my head which says look out for Maidenhead. They'll get in the playoffs. Just you wait. But as the weeks go by, that is less and less looking convincing. Hornchurch, they're on goal difference outside of the title, by the way, in third place. It's pretty crazy at the moment. The top 3 teams are all on 39 points. And so I'm going to have to back Hornchurch because there's a reason they're up there. You know, there is a reason they're up there. 4-2 to Hornchurch. It's also very local to each other. No, sorry, not local. Relatively local. Yeah, not really. I was more thinking of Dagenham and Redbridge, which are just above Maidenhead in the table. Yeah, on to Maidstone United versus Bath City. Maidstone are 2 points outside the playoffs, and I'm really 50-50 on whether they can actually get into the playoffs. Part of me says definitely, they've done it before, why can't they do it again? Part of me looks at them current playoff teams and thinks Mason have no way got a good enough form to be able to do it. So they are at home up against a Bath City, which yes have been having a few results of late, but I can't think they're going to get any higher than 16th at this present moment in time. There seems to be they're on 22 and the team below them 15 on 27. There seems to be a cut-off really of the bottom. What is that? 8 or 9 teams. Seems a bit cut off, and so I'm going to go back Mason to win this one. 3-0 to the Kent-based side. Salisbury versus Hemel Hempstead Town. Salisbury are no their teams in that position in 18th. But they've had back-to-back losses, but before that had a really decent run. So if they can regain that run of form, that is something to hold on to. And I think Hemel Hempstead maybe come into this one bit complacent, thinking, you know what, Salisbury, they're down there and a bit of a pickle at the moment. We can go and dominate and have an off day. 5-0 to Salisbury. It might be another one of my mad predictions. We'll have to see. Torquay United versus Tonbridge Angels. 5 wins in a row for Torquay. A very good run of form indeed. Tonbridge Angels down in 17th, only 1 win in the last 6 games. But I think this is going to be more even than people think. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. I don't know about Torquay. There's still question marks that I have over. They seem to get to a point and then they act a bit arrogant and fall off. I don't know if I'm fair in saying that, but that's just an opinion that I have. Brighton and Hove Albion versus West Ham United on the Sunday games. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about how good Brighton are at the moment. And you know what? I can't see them losing this one up against a very not the strongest West Ham side that we've seen. I certainly think Graham Potter, is he still around at West Ham United? Whoever the manager, there did seem to be a bit of a bounce a few weeks back, didn't there? It's now Nuno Espirito Santo. Why did I think it was Graham Potter? I think he was their manager beforehand or something. But yeah, certainly for me, Brighton win this one. We won't go comfortably, but 3-2 to Brighton Hove Albion. West could have, I do think Nuno will do an all right job, actually. It's just, at the moment, it's hard to see West Ham stay out of that relegation scrap. Fulham versus Crystal Palace, yet again, a London derby, and yet again, I'm talking about how good Crystal Palace has been. And, you know, Fulham haven't been bad of late, but I just can't get over the fact that Crystal Palace, for me, defensively, they're good. It's just attacking you. If they get that clicked, everything starts falling into place for them. 3-0 to Palace in this one. Slough Town to Macclesfield in the FA Cup. Another National League South versus National League North. So at least 2 Tier 6 teams are going to be actually in the third round draw. And both of these 2 teams will be determined to make sure that they're the name in it. I'm going to go 1-1 draw and Macclesfield to win in extra time or on penalties. I think it'll be a very even draw, even game overall. Bournemouth versus Newport County. We know Bournemouth have gone on some good runs before. Maybe they do so again. I'm going to go 0-0, but I do think Newport do win in extra time and 1 penalties. They were known for years of being the FA Cup upsetters. So how it feels to be on the other end of a shoe is hard to think about. And that is going to be on TV. Whether I'm going to do a live watch along will probably not happen because I think I'm going to go to Gateshead versus Walsall, which we're now going to talk about now. Now, Gateshead have done horrendously. Now, Walsall are doing really well in League Two. This, for me, has all the hallmarks of an absolute classic upset. Walsall come in, think they're going to easily dominate this game. Look how bad Gateshead have been recently. Gateshead will be playing like absolutely nothing, no one else. Like it's ultimate free hit, if you will. 3-0 to Gateshead is what I'm going to go with. So I'm hoping I'm right because I'm going to that game and I really hope that the Gateshead Ultras do me proud as well. I'm hoping to go to that game. I need to see. As I was saying, I've got a job interview tomorrow and I need to see what they would expect me to do, if anything, if I get that job. If I don't, you know what, we'll carry on going. We'll go to the Gateshead game regardless. But yeah, Blackpool versus Carlisle United, awesome FA Cup. Interesting with these two teams playing each other in League One, considering how far Carlisle have fallen. And Blackpool look like they're going to fall away a bit. Maybe, as I was mentioning earlier, needing a result to maybe calm some nerves. 3-0 will go with Blackpool in this one. They can't, whatever they do, is they can't get knocked out by a non-league team. It's a very bad situation if that happens. I think Wolves finally get a win against Manchester United. That'd be most Wolverhampton Wanderers. Well, most Man United thing as well, wouldn't it? 2-0 to Wolverhampton Wanderers. At the moment, Man United are a farce of a football club. Brackley Town versus Burton Albion, and I'm going to say it. This is going to be an upset, isn't it? A 2-2 draw. Burton Albion never do well in the FA Cup, and Brackley Town to win in extra time or on penalties. They did it up against Notts County. Why can't they do the same up against Burton Albion, another fellow Midlander team? Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new around here. We've got a lot coming up this week, as I've already mentioned in galore. But I'll see you all if you come around in the next one. Bye for now.